Wu Da-wei, China's special representative for Korean Peninsula affairs, who also represents China in the six-party talks, recently proposed a revival of the North-South talk, followed by a North Korea-US talk, and culminating with the six-party talk that focuses on North Korea's possession of nuclear weapons. And the focus now is on whether North and South Korea will resume the talks between the two. On Today in Focus, we will discuss North and South Korea's reaction to China's proposed three-stage process and the possibility of inter-Korea talks basing on North Korea's possession of nuclear weapons.
On April 12th, Wu Da-wei, the special representative for Korean Peninsula affairs, proposed a revival of the North-South talk. In contrast to the South Korean government, which always suggested North-South talks followed by the six-party talk, China had always maintained the order of six-party talks first. This time, however, they have proposed a new way to proceed this. China is proposing for a three-stage process. It will start with an inter-Korean meeting between chief nuclear negotiators as a lead-up to North Korea-US talks before the resumption of six-party talks. In response to China's three-stage proposal, South Korean government has responded favorably to it and will discuss the issue further on with U.S. Secretary of State Hillary Clinton, who will be visiting Korea on April 16th. If North Korea accepts the proposal, the first ever official meeting will take place to discuss the nuclear issues between the North and the South. This is the first time an inter-Korean meeting is discussed with the North's nuclear possessions as part of the subject. What would be North's response to this? Let's delve deeper into the inter-Korean nuclear negotiations.
Welcome back. To discuss China's new proposal for the resumption of the six-party talk and the possibility of inter-Korean dialogue, we invited two experts to our program today. To my right is Professor Ju Jae-woo from Kyunghee University. Welcome back to the program, Professor Ju.
Thank you.
And to my left is Professor Dennis Florik from Hankuk University of Foreign Studies. It's good to see you again on the show, Professor
Good to
Florik.
see you also.
Okay, well, Professor Ju,
Yes.
China's nuclear envoy Wu Da-wei proposed this three-step approach to resume the stalled six-party talk. How is this proposal different from previous positions of China with regard to six-party talk? What is the background of this proposal?
Yes, the six-party talks has been a stalemate since the year 2008, and there seems to be no breakthrough at all because of, if you look at all the military actions and provocative actions taken by North Korea since then, including the first and second nuclear testings and long-distance missile launches, and of course there was military skirmishes or naval attacks on South Korea, as well as the recent Yongbyon shelling. And there seems to be, it looks like, security situation has been, spiraling down southward. And obviously, to the interest of China, as a host of the six-party talks, they don't want this six-party talks to go away. And obviously, since last year, especially after the sinking of the Cheonan, they've been asking this, member parties to gather together and hold the talks without any conditions. However, that didn't persuade anybody, and obviously they have to come up with a better solution or better persuasion to all these member countries, and I think this is what they came up with, the so-called three-stage
But even before Wu Da-wei's proposal, China's position has been that the inter-Korean dialogue should precede the six-party talk. At least this was the consensus between the two countries after the summit meeting early this year. So
recently, that's been the Chinese position. The Chinese have never seen the six-party talks and inter-Korean talks as mutually exclusive. They see them as mutually supportive. And since there has been these military clashes between North and South, the Chinese, like everybody else, recognizes the urgency of improving North-South relations.
So the only difference I see is the second part, which is really the bilateral talk between the United States and North Korea. Is this?
Well, that's also not really a change. China has always encouraged the United States and North Korea to talk directly. I think the public statement indicates that the Chinese may expect that such U.S. DPRK discussions may be forthcoming. And the indication that former President Jimmy Carter is going to be making an unofficial trip to North Korea within a month, I think that that's probably the case.
I think this proposal came as a bit of a surprise to the member countries of the six-party talks. So could you first tell us how the U.S. has responded to this proposal?
Well, the U.S. hasn't changed its fundamental position. Its fundamental position is the six-party talks broke down because the DPRK has not shown sincerity in the denuclearization process. In the various six-party agreements that have been made in the past, North Korea has promised to give up entirely its nuclear weapons, but clearly it has not carried out this policy, and that's why the six-party talks have run aground, basically.
I see.
However, a few months ago, Secretary of Defense Robert Gates did say if North Korea were to announce a public moratorium on all nuclear and missile testing, that would be a sign of the sincerity that the United States is looking for.
Professor Zhu,
Yes.
what has been the reaction of Japan and Russia?
I think Japan is very much preoccupied with its recovery efforts of a tsunami and earthquake, so they haven't come out with any official, statement on this particular subject. But Russia is basically welcoming the idea of resumption of the six-party talks. That's what the news has been so far.
I see. Well, what has been the response of the South Korean government? Do you see any noticeable remarks made by the South Korean government officials or statements?
The spokesman or the officials from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs made a positive statement on the idea of on the idea of the three-stage process. But right now, at this moment, Ri Sung-rak, the special representative to the Korean Peninsula nuclear talks, he's right now in Washington, D.C., and I think he's still in the middle of discussion with the United States, and I don't think he has come out with any statement yet.
I see. So South Korean government imposed a couple of preconditions, if you will, on North Korea for initiating an inter-Korean dialogue.
That's right.
First, admit that you sank the Cheonan warship and apologize for the sinking of Cheonan and the shelling of Yeonpyeong Island.
That's right.
And second, you should be more sincere about denuclearization this time.
Right.
So do you think we need to sort of drop these preconditions? Or what do you think is going to happen to these preconditions? Do you think we have to at least scale them down a little bit?
I think we're going to get a better picture after Mr. Wee returns from Washington and after Hillary's visit to South Korea on the 16th. And I think under what kind of conditions or what kind of settings or the requisites, we may say, the talks between South Korea and North Korea will be held will have a tremendous impact on the stance of America for their coming talks with North Korea in the future.
I see, yes. So we will talk more about Secretary Clinton's visit to South Korea a little later. Seems to me that a lot of South Koreans are saying that we shouldn't be dropping these preconditions. If this is the case, if we can really drop these preconditions, can we say that the success of this proposal depends on North Korea's attitudes? Do you think the ball is in North Korea's court now?
Not necessarily. The North Koreans don't see either the Cheonan sinking nor the Yeonpyeong incident in the same way that South Koreans do. They see themselves as the victims of the Yeonpyeong incident. They've already apologized for the civilian casualties that were caused by their shelling of the island. I don't think there's any possibility that they are going to apologize for the incident itself. So South Korea, I think, is getting pretty far out on a limb if it continues to hang on to that demand.
I see. Woo Da-wei made this proposal after he met with Kim Gae-kwan, South Korea's chief nuclear negotiator. So the chances are that North Korea was already notified of this proposal before Woo Da-wei made this official statement. So do you think China made any specific demands to North Korea? Do you think China persuaded North Koreans to be more conciliatory, to be more receptive to South Korea's preconditions?
Yes, I think my speculation is that China is not only making diplomatic efforts to North Korea, but also to other members of the six-party talks. If you recollect a little bit since the second half of last year, especially after the shelling of the Yeonpyeong Island in November, because right after the shelling, Woo Da-wei made an abrupt and sudden unscheduled visit to South Korea and held meetings talks with President Lee Myung-bak. And after that, he went to Pyongyang, and I'm sure he must have delivered some kind of message to Kim Jong-il. And probably from there on, I think China and North Korea have been talking about ways to better, the security situation in Northeast Asia and the Korean Peninsula and Pacific. And right before Woo Da-wei went to North Korea, he also talked to President Obama on the phone on December 6th. And so I think if we summarize that, and there's also one event that we should take a notice in February, I believe it was in February or March, that the head of the public safety of China also made a visit to Pyongyang, and I think there might have been some kind of talks and discussions between the top leaders of between the minister and Kim Jong-il during his visit to Pyongyang.
So if that's the case, do you think North Korea is going to be a bit more conciliatory this time? I mean, which side do you think do you think is under more pressure now? I mean, do you think South Korea should modify its preconditions, or do you think North Korea should be more conciliatory or more receptive to?
I think the ball's in Pyongyang's court, and I think we should be more flexible with our demand because I think, but that should be really determined with a close discussion and negotiation with Washington because, like I said, it's going to have an effect on the requisites that the United States has put forward to North Korea before Washington can have talks with Pyongyang.
So immediately after the incident, the United States articulated the same demands as South Korea, both the seriousness about denuclearization and apology. But the United States has dropped mentioning the apology in recent weeks.
So both sides need to concede to a certain extent.
I think both sides need to give some ground here. I think it's more important not exactly what the agenda is for the talks or what the preconditions are for the talks. I think the most important thing is the spirit in which the talks are held. If the talks are seen by both sides as just a forum for recriminations and for accusations, then there's not going to be any progress. So I think both sides need to come with a spirit of actually making progress, particularly on the West Sea issues that have been so damaging recently.
Let's talk about Secretary Clinton's visit to South Korea. I think one of the objectives of her visit is to coordinate the position of the two countries on China's new proposals. So what is the significance of her visit? What is going to be the result of her visit?
Well, I don't know what the result of her visit is going to be. We'll have to wait and see. The United States and South Korea are in constant consultation about what position to take towards North Korea, towards China, towards the six-party talks. I think a difference is emerging between the United States and South Korea over the precondition of an apology, and I expect that eventually the United States position will win out.
Well, what is the significance of Hillary Clinton's visit to?
Yes, my speculation would be that I think the United States and South Korea are under a certain pressure to really seriously review and consult on the proposed three-stage process by China. And I think we may come out with a coordinated position on our preconditions or requisites that we're going to raise to North Korea. I think that will be the most significant issue that they're going to deal with.
North Korea, previously, they refused to talk about denuclearization with South Koreans on the grounds that denuclearization is an issue, basically an issue between the United States and North Korea. But if they decide to participate in the first step of this new proposal by China, they oblige you to talk about nuclear issues with South Koreans. And this is going to be unprecedented in relations between the two Koreas. So how do you foresee the prospects of nuclear talks between the two Koreas?
I think on that spot, I think South Korea is particularly excited about. But the result is going to be really difficult to predict because, the six-party talk has not progressed that much either. And, whether we can come out with some kind of substantial result is really difficult to predict. But, from a long-term perspective, I think it is a groundbreaking, significant event for the talks between South Korea and North Korea for the coming future.
I see. Well, what do you think, Professor?
I think it's important if North Korea were to agree to discuss the nuclear issues with South Korea, but ultimately the real negotiations will be between North Korea and the U.S.
I see. Let's say that we be able to cross the first and second hurdles of the three-step approach, and let's say that we be able to resume the six-party talk. Then do you think this six-party talk is going to be any different from six-party talks of a previous era?
Well, the United States is most concerned with the denuclearization. North Korea, one of the reasons why the United States wants to go back to the six-party talks is because of the promises North Korea has made in the past through the six-party process. Now, the underlying issue is whether the North Koreans have come to a decision that they intend to keep their nuclear weapons. You know, they've had them for a while now, and they just seem to be increasingly comfortable assuming that they are a nuclear power. However, I do think that the original bargain that was articulated in the agreed framework is still attractive to North Korea. I do believe that North Korea would possibly be willing to give up its nuclear weapons in return for real security. That was the fundamental deal that was worked out in the early 1990s, and it's been the basis of all the negotiations since, that North Korea will give up its nuclear weapons in return for an end of the hostile policy from the United States. Now, the recent events in the West Sea prove that hostilities between the United States and North Korea still exist. So from the North Korean perspective, they can look back on all these years of negotiations and ask themselves, what have they really achieved? So I think that the current emphasis that North Korea is putting on a peace treaty as a formalization of the end of the hostilities of the Korean War is very important because it would represent to the North Koreans more progress in this process of ending the hostilities between the DPRK and the U.S.
What do you think, Professor Chu? Do you think the six-party members can cross the first and second hurdles and move towards the resumption of the six-party talk this time?
Yes, that's wishful thinking, and I like to bet my money on that too. You know, because otherwise, the situation, security situation around the Korean Peninsula would only spiral downward, and we would not like to see that. And hopefully, just like Professor Flory just mentioned, all the substance all the demands and all the wishes that North Korea has been seeking for are all in the September 19th agreement. It is just a matter of how we're going to unpack the deal and take one by one out of that package. So hopefully this time, I think China can be more of an aggressive partner because I think China's basic fundamental stance on the North Korean issue has significantly changed because of the shelling of the Yongbyon. Before that, China's really sympathized, North Korea's security perception or outlook on the Korean Peninsula, just like Professor Flory mentioned, because the threat from the United States was there in the aftermath of or the following military exercise between South Korea and the United States proved that to North Korea and China. But the shelling of the Yongbyon Island really proved that, things are more dangerous with North Korea because, everything went on live. And it was aired live, and it really shocked the Chinese audience too. And I think if you look at all these developments, I think China could be a more of an aggressive partner to resume the talks and hopefully to bring the talks to better results. And if that's the case, I think what China really needs is support from South Korea and the United States. And here, if three nations can cooperate closely, and I think we can expect some kind of results or better results.
I see. Anyways, China made this rather surprising proposal. What would be the policy recommendations that you'd like to make to the South Korean government at this stage?
Wow. Since last December, I think it was last month that Foreign Minister of China, Yang Jiechi, he came to Seoul last month and held talks with our foreign ministry counterpart, and there he also conveyed China's position on this issue, and if I remember correctly, Minister Yang also asked more of consolatory, not consolatory, but more of a, sincere efforts from South Korea to improve the security conditions of the Korean Peninsula and better position on the talks with North Korea as well as the six-party talks. But the details are not really too clear, so I'm afraid I don't think...
the South Korean government should work on improving the inter-Korean relationship. Professor Flori, if you can put yourself in the shoes of key foreign policy advisor to President Lee Myung-bak, what is going to be your advice?
Well, I would give advice to three different parties. First of all, I'd give advice to the North Koreans. If you really want real security, you're going to have to go back to the denuclearization process. There is no other way for you to end the condition which you face now, which is of great hostility from great powers. Second, I would advise the Lee Myung-bak administration to be more flexible and to not make demands that aren't going to be met.
Okay.
And then I would advise the United States to recognize that the six-party talks or any talks are never going to be successful unless North Korea's security is truly guaranteed, whether it's through a peace treaty or whether it's through formal diplomatic recognition, or exactly the process is less important than the end state, which is North Korea no longer feels a threat. North Korea really only has one important bargaining chip in these negotiations, which is its nuclear weapons. And it's not going to give up its only chip unless it achieves its fundamental objective. And the United States needs to be aware of this, that the only way they're going to be able to successfully denuclearize the Korean Peninsula is to actually come to a much better relationship with North Korea.
Any final thoughts that you'd like to share with us today, Professor Chu?
Yes, hopefully the talks between Hillary Clinton and our foreign minister could be really fruitful, and hopefully Mr. Wee, he comes back from Washington with some good substance so that we can get the six-party talks and inter-Korean talks get going.
Okay. It looks like that you'll have the final word for today's episode.
Well, as I said, I think that all the parties need to recognize what's necessary to get to a deal. And then, of course, working out the process of getting there is also a very important thing. But North Korea needs to be serious about denuclearization, needs to accept that it can't keep its nuclear weapons and have real security. And the United States needs to recognize that it can't get rid of the nuclear weapons until North Korea has real security.
Well, I guess this is all for today's discussion. Thank you very much for sharing your insights today. Thank you very much.
Thank you.